Hello, everyone. Welcome to the first session of Cloudburst in Stockholm. I did this exact presentation yesterday in Copenhagen, and it was like 60 minutes on the dot, but that included some lovely questions from the audience. So I have a lot of content, a lot of information or knowledge to share. I hope you enjoy it, and do ask questions as they come up in your mind. That's okay, and we'll power through this one. And I'm going to share the best access control practices that I have gathered from experience. And I just want to mention that I work with various companies. I have worked with the enterprise level of national critical infrastructure in Denmark, for example, the enablement project. I have worked with very small, literally walk down a ramp to a basement companies. Doesn't actually matter. Anyone who needs cloud, I'll be there to help. That's my gig. That's my game. And from that, I have gathered that we could do a lot better in the area of access control. Having access control that could use some improvement leads to some unintended side effects, right? The wrong people have the wrong access. And that's what this session is about, giving some inspiration and some tips and guidance to how to improve your access control into your Azure estate. That said, I'm very certain that I have plenty of talented people in this audience, and I'm sure you will recognize and just say, yeah, I knew that one. I knew that one, Magnus. This is nothing new. That's fine. That just means that you're awesome. Reality is that out there in the projects and the companies that I work with, not all the time everyone is as awesome. Okay? That's just the truth. And I'm not going to name names and so on and so forth, right? I did say an Eginet, but it's a massive enterprise. And yes, they have access control issues. Everyone do. You, again, are awesome. And I'm so happy to see people in 3D. A while ago, me giving this presentation would have mean that I've been giving this presentation to a little black dot. And I wouldn't have had the pleasure of seeing your faces and interacting with you as I can here today. So I'm so happy to be back on stage. That said, my name is Magnus Martinsson. I run my own company, my consultancy about Azure. Anything Azure, everybody keeps asking me about it. It's my business, and I have by now 11 Azure MVP titles under my belt. My wonderful colleague, Alan, in this game, I beat you with 6 months. I was the first Azure MVP in the Nordic countries, and you were the second. We were the first two in all of the Nordics to be Azure MVPs. I'm also what Microsoft like to call a regional director, which is a really funky title because it's a Microsoft regional director. I don't work for Microsoft, I don't have a region, and I do not direct anything. But it means that I'm a friend of Microsoft at a high up level, which is lovely. We get to have some nice networking with the VP segment of Microsoft. So I'm all up in Microsoft stuff, essentially. So if you have a secret, you can lose it, right? And so access control is a lot about having secrets stored in such a way that you can't lose them. No one can steal it. Because effectively what any hacker in the world wants to do is break in and steal your secrets and your data, right? That's what they want to do. So we want to ensure that with proper access control, that cannot happen. Automation is a fundamental piece here because humans, we are flawed just by design, right? And we will make mistakes. So with automation, we can ensure that computers take over. You don't send a human to do a computer's job. And there are plenty of tools, plenty of services, plenty of features in the Azure platform for access control. What I see, of course, with all the customers that I work with is that those resources are underutilized. They can be activated more. So this session is about pointing out which they are and when or how you would use them. When you don't have the appropriate access control set up, you get into places like, the human error question that I just mentioned, right? How do I avoid people making mistakes, running the wrong script on the wrong thing, right? If you have access to development and production, you intended to run a script on development, but oops, I chose the wrong database or I chose the wrong subscription or whatever I did. I'm a human, so I broke it, and now I ran the thing on the wrong subscription and we're literally screwed, right? And oh, let's get the job done, right? Let's fix it first. Exactly, right? So we need to make the customers happy. We need to get the business on track and make the service work. And then we'll fix that automation, access control, appropriate level stuff later, right? Sure. It's much easier now to give developers ownership of all the subscriptions because then technical people can do technical things, right? I know I'm the responsible, person formally responsible for security in this company, but I have lots to do, many meetings, all the things, and I'm not a technical person. So just to make it easy and enable the developers, the technical people to do technical things, I'm just going to let them do that, right? Because you all know that you're the nerds, right? And I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. I mean it quite the opposite. Normal people, right? They're the non-magical folks. They're the muggles, if you will, right? We're the magical people. We can do magical things. You know that, excuse me. You know that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, right? We're magical people, and the muggles don't understand. So we'll just give them access, and they will do technical things, and everything will be cool. Right. And we will generalize and automate, but tomorrow. Essentially, effectively, actually, tomorrow is the same day I'm going to the gym. And my favorite, whose database is that? Wait, is that your database? Is it your database? You know what you do when there's a database, you don't know who owns it, right? You shut it down and you see who comes running. That's exactly what you do. But the point of that last item there is waste. So much waste. We are proud professionals. We want to do a great job. We want to be empowered and enabled to do an awesome engineering job and deliver services and do all the cool stuff. Except when nobody seems to care about being strict with consuming Azure resources, then why would I? I'll just deploy a Godzilla-sized VM just because it's fun. It's fun also on the bill, right? So this is kind of the scenario that we see. So you know what happens next. It's a big explosion. I've seen this happen, like not literally that, but figuratively that in companies, right? Like when you have a 12-month enterprise agreement of $1 million and it runs out in 7 months. It's not a fun conversation to have when the blame game starts. Like, how the heck would this happen? Like crazy, oh my God, all the waste. About a third, let me just actually mention that as well. About a third, this is self-reported Azure resource consumption waste in a recent survey. About a third of that is waste. So you have $1 million of an enterprise agreement, and 333,000 of those are just burning money on the lawn, right? That's exactly where we are at. And giving inappropriate access and not empowering people will lead to these kinds of scenarios. So I want access to do my job, but I do not want access to all other things. Another wonderful scenario is the company that I worked with that had, they had lots of databases across the world. So they had like a database server with like 500 databases over there, 800 databases over there. And then they had newly hired people. And what do you do with newly hired people? You give them support cases so they can kind of warm up and get into the business and so on and so forth. So they have a ticket to work with one customer with one database, and they can't give access to just one database, so they give access to a database server. Newly hired person, support cases, access to root access as an admin to the whole database server with 800 databases. Yeah, that's perfect. It is a ticking time bomb, a recipe for disaster. My little Venn diagram here, this is what we want, right? We want to strike a balance between enablement, of course. You should be able to do your job. You should have access and be empowered to do your thing. And this needs to be possible to govern over time, to maintain and manage and add and remove people and access and so forth. Because, like I indicated before, we are proud professionals. We want to do a good job. We want to be empowered and enabled to be accountable so that we can show that we really can take a responsibility and deliver on the money and just deliver exactly what we need to do, right? That's what we want. So let's dive into the 5 different pieces of advice that I have for us here today. The first one being access control in relation to Azure Active Directory security groups. And what do I mean by this? Well, the thing is, your identity is stored in the Azure Active Directory, right? That's where your user information is, and that's which you authenticate against when you sign in, and all those things. However, of course, as I'm sure you all know, when you grant access to something in Azure, that information about the access, the metadata, it is stored in Azure. There is a divide between these two. And 2 different systems are now managing the situation. What I'm proposing is nothing new at all. What I'm proposing is that we apply the principle that we have used in this industry for like 25 years or more, for the longest time in IT, that we don't do it this way. And I will show you the scenario using a scary story about ghosts and zombies. I know. So once upon a time, as every story should begin, there was 2 employees, Casper and Dave. Casper and Dave, as you can see, they're a ghost and a zombie, and they work at my company. And this is Casper and Dave having access to a resource group called Ghosts and Zombies in Azure. I've granted them access. You can see Demo Dave right there. He has a read access here, and Casper also has read access here. Could have been any access, could have been any context, but here it is a resource group, and they have read access. However, as it goes, both Casper and Dave, sadly, they need to leave my company and go work elsewhere. So this is what it looks like when they have left in Azure, right? So as you know, Casper is a ghost, so he has ghosted the whole situation, and Azure is telling us that there is an identity not found, unable to find identity. There's a like a remnant of this ghosty thing just hanging around here still. He's gone. This is the equivalent of deleting an identity object from the Azure Active Directory, right? Azure still remembers that something with an identity key something was there, but I can't find it in the directory anymore. And the other one is even worse, if you will. That's littering, right? The other one is even worse. Demo Dave is still there. So 5 months later, a new person is working at my company, right? Bob. And Bob is like, okay, so this service here that's running in this resource group, I think I'll go talk to Dave about that. Yeah? And we're like, Dave who? Dave who? Oh, he doesn't work here anymore. Well, why does Dave have access still? Dave's account is, of course, disabled. He can't sign in, but the presence is still there. So this is just littering again, right? It's misleading and it's an issue. And I bloody hate that. If you compound this with hundreds of people and hundreds of subscriptions, maybe thousands or even more of resources, you have a major problem on your hands. So you should not be giving humans or people these types of identities access here. So instead, you grant access only to groups in Azure. And I will show you how that works. Here is an access group. This is an Azure Active Directory security group, right? The security group is defined as the Zombies and Ghosts Reader AG, which in this case is a naming convention saying it's for this resource group, and it's a read access group, and it's an AG, an access group. Use whatever naming convention you like, I don't care. Point is, this is a group that has access. And the end of the story, because now the situation is much better. And I'm going to clarify even further why and how this is set up. And you already know this, but let's still go through it. Let's go through the motions because I believe it's important, right? So this is the hierarchy of access in Azure. Even further up, there's management groups and so forth, but we don't need to talk about that now. If you know that if you have access to the highest level here, there are some employees here. Let's give them access. Yes. Let's give them owner access to the subscription. So all the employees have owner access in the subscription. They can do anything. They can grant and revoke access to anyone. They can modify any resource, delete, deploy, do all the things. Brilliant, right? In all the resource groups with all the resources, because it's a tree, so it's a hierarchy, right? Yeah, that's not how to do it, because that leads to all kinds of pain. It leads to wasteful behavior. It leads to mistakes. It leads to all kinds of problems. So instead, what you do is you create a user group for your, in this case, department. It's a department foo, and we give them a user group. This is an Active Directory security group. And then you create another Active Directory security group, and you grant that security group access to the things you want it to have access to. So the group has access. And then simply, of course, you make the organizational group a member of the access group. And now all the people there have the same access. Okay? Except now, the difference is the identities of the people and the security groups are stored in a system which is built for that, the Active Directory. This doesn't mean absolutely that, yes, that green access group certainly does have access in Azure. It can or cannot have access there, right? But it means that if you set it up in this way, you can read from the Active Directory who has access to what and kind of understand that in a system, again, built for the purpose. Here's another example just to tie the knot. The team bar has a team leader there with a 404 t-shirt on. And this team bar has an access group as contributors to some resources in the cloud, and then you grant them membership again in a similar fashion. Now, this setup has another consequence, which I find is awesome and very useful here. The team lead of this group, Tina, is the team leader and the owner of that, and she can be made an owner of that security group, because security groups can have an owner, which means that she can manage membership. So when Tina has a new team member, Cesar, he joins the company, Tina herself is empowered to include Cesar in the team, in the security group, effectively giving Cesar as well the same access. So there's a bit of access delegation going on here, which is super handy, because now you don't have to do it super central all the time, because Tina would know who is in her team. She can manage that. So that's a very nice side effect. Without giving Tina the access to grant and revoke any kind of access in Azure, right? She can only give access to the groups she can give access to, which gives her a limited delegation authority, right? Very handy. So the Azure Active Directory graph of things, groups and people and so on, kind of knows who has access where, which is, this is what this is built for. So use the tool for what it is for. And there are no ghosts and zombies in Azure, because there are only access groups granted access in Azure, right? So there's not going to be any of those identity unknown scenarios. And again, the delegated access is appealing here, where Tina can self-manage her own team. And yes, of course, there can be more than one owner to a group, and you can remove and replace them. Yes. I yeah. Yeah. Brilliant. We will talk about managed identities a little bit later, and the short answer to your question, and to repeat for the stream, how does managed identities and service principals and other things fit into the same picture? We're talking about user identities only. It fits very well in here, and I believe you should do whatever floats your goat, right? Whatever you like. If you want to include the managed identities in the same contexts, in the same groups, that's absolutely fine. It works just the same. Any kind of identity? That's a great question, and we will talk more about managed identities as we go along. So now that we have granted access to people, we also have the next step, which is the privileged identity management stuff, right? So in Azure, you have the ability to set up eligibility for access and then activate that access just in time when you need it. It's called Privileged Identity Management, or PIM. I'm sure that many of you know this, and I'm also very sure that in general in this industry, most people do not use it. And there are some reasons for this that I will talk about. So we don't want permanent access, because permanent access means that we can make mistakes. If I have permanent access to production, it is possible that I choose the wrong, connection string or some stupid thing. I just happen to run the wrong script on the wrong thing, and dang it, right? I want access just in time when I need it, specifically for production. I want to make sure that I am focused and that I activate access into production when I'm doing a specific thing. And other times I do not have access because it helps me. Again, back to the scenario with the newly hired and the 800 databases, right? That person wanted access to one database. When I talked to those people in support about this issue, they were all in complete agreement. We don't want to have this access, except we can't do our job unless we have access to the database we need to have access to, right? So let's talk about PIM. You go to Azure and you search for PIM and you get into what it looks like. Rather than giving permanent access, you give eligibility to have a given access, and then the user can request to activate the role over a given scope. Now, this was feedback from Copenhagen, so I'll remember to say it up front. You can have a manager sign off on these requests, but you can also set it up in such a way that you don't need a manager sign off. So there's this option as well. You can run it with, what's cool here is that you can use multi-factor authentication and stuff in conjunction with this, which means that we can be very, very sure that you have the ability to go into production anytime you need, and you can verify it with multi-factor authentication. So we know it's you. You have the trust to do it, but you don't always have to be burdened with having that access permanently, right? So a request can be granted or denied, and it's always audited, which is great for compliancy purposes and security audits and so forth. So it's always audited, and you get that data. You can pull that data out of Azure and put it into your SIEM system or wherever you need to have it, and have it audited. So let's talk about the delivery manager, Dave. He wants to swap a new version of the website into production. And here's version 1 of the website. It's a brilliant website. It's version 1. And I don't know if I'm going to dare to zoom in, because sometimes that just goes awry. But let's try it. So here is version 1 of the website, and it has a staging slot. So it says -staging there in the address bar. And in the staging slot, version 2 is staged to go into production. So what Dave needs to do is swap the version of the old website out with a new version. Oops, I did the wrong thing. I disconnected from StreamYard. That's brilliant. Actually, we need to put I will. That's interesting. I'm backstage, present my screen. So don't press escape. That's what I did. You shouldn't be doing that. Tell me when I'm back in StreamYard. Thank you. Escape is a bad key, just for reference. Again, gone? No, I did not. I'm gone from StreamYard again? There's something else wrong, because share screen, click, share. Let's try. And are we good? Okay. No idea. Just hide that. Okay. Let's pretend that didn't happen. I'm not sure. All I did was click escape. Don't zoom. I tried to zoom and it fell apart. So all right. Okay. So the thing is, there's a swap button there in the web application, right? With which you will be swapping these slots. However, right, Dave has the ability to stage. He has access to deploy a new version of the website in the staging slot. He has contributor access there. However, Dave does not have contributor access in production. So Dave cannot swap into production, right? The easy way to do it would be to give Dave contributor access in production. And then he can actually go in and change anything there at any time. So we don't want that. So instead, we're going to, and also if Dave clicks on deployment slots, this is me using PowerPoint screenshots, by the way. If you click on deployment slots, you'll see it says clearly you do not have swap permission. Dang it. So what do? Well, IT now creates a custom role. Now, you don't have to create custom roles. You could use a contributor role for this as well, a built-in role. But let's do it with a custom role. Let's give a specific access this time, just as an example. So I want to create a custom role called Web App Slot Swapper. Right? Makes sense? Because that's what we want to do. We want to swap the slots of a web app. Right? So it makes sense to me. So let's actually go into this guy. This guy is Visual Studio Code, and I will do Control K and a Z to get my full screen demo mode larger. It's probably going to crawl out of the screen when I do that, but it might be. Is this visible enough in the back? Cool. So I'm going to, from Azure, I'm going to pull down, I'm going to execute that line and pull down from Azure all the specific access permissions, all the operations you are able to do on the Microsoft.web/star on the Microsoft Web resource provider. Okay, and then I'm going to list them out. So I'm executing the next line there. It's a long list of access permissions. It's a very long list. Let's see how long this list is. It's 627 different actions on the web one alone. And I keep updating this number, so 627. Okay, I've done this demo a couple of times, right? And over time, the number of actions, potential actions, keeps growing. So giving contributor access gives you full authority to run 627 different actions on the provider. Okay, literally that number, because I just counted. So what we can do is figure out the exact actions. Here's one called the, I can pull out a specific action called Microsoft.web/site/slot/swap/action. Very specific action. Now, again, this is super, super detailed. This is hyper detail, right? This is cherry picking two specific actions. The other one is Microsoft.web/site/slots/slot/swap/action. It's a very long name. Blah, 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 right? Say that 10 times fast. I couldn't even say it once. So these two very specific actions, we're cherry picking them, right? And then I create a role, and I've already deployed the role into Azure called the Web App Slot Swapper. It's already there. However, if I wanted to create a new role, any new role, here's what you do. You go and say, okay, get me a role definition, any role definition from Azure. And here is a role definition. It's the role definition call for the website contributor. Now, if I scroll up here just a little bit, actually I can do it this way. If I scroll up here a little bit, it doesn't show exactly what it is. So I will show you the actions of it. And you'll see that, yes, the web app contributor role has access to do a lot of things, right? Can do all the things and more, right? Even things outside of the Microsoft.web context. So it's brilliant. With that access, you can do all the things. We just don't want to do all the things. So what I can do is take any role, remove the name and the ID, give it a new description, call it a custom role, clear out the actions. This is literally how the documentation does it. So I'm not doing anything magical or crazy. Add my specific 2 actions only, list those. Yes, I only have a couple of them. And then I can give it an assignable scope wherever it needs to go. And then I can say new role definition, and I can push my custom role to Azure. Okay, I can update it, and I can delete them, and I can do all the things that you would expect. And technically, I do actually have a bug in this, but I'm going to show this anyway. This is what it looks like, except that I made a mistake there, but never mind. You can store this as JSON, is my point, right? You can store it as a file, a little blob of JSON in a little JSON file, And you can have a library of these, and you can rev them and check them into your repository and so forth. And you can deploy them with automation. So this is manageable with a specific purpose in mind. And in this case, we want to ensure that Demo Dave is not burdened with contributor access to production because he does not need it. He needs to swap the new version of the website into production, right? So we're giving a very specific access. Thing is that now Dave, he is the delivery manager. He can always go to production anytime he likes. He doesn't need to ask permission, but it's Dave. And let's just be sure that like Dave is a delivery manager, but he's not the owner of the application. So he needs sign off. He needs to go to his manager to get permission to do this. So now the manager can assign privileged identity management or just-in-time access for Dave. Here's the manager. It's me. It's Magnus. I'm signed into Azure, and I can now go and say, let's see if we can set up some resources for Azure here. The zombies and ghosts context is where I need to be. And what can I do? Assignments. Yes, I want to add an assignment. I want to pick the web app slot swapper role, and I want to choose Dave, and then I want to say that he is eligible to activate this. And this is just me next clicking the default settings through. Again, I could say that he doesn't need to have manager approval. But right now I want Dave to have manager approval required. And once that is put in the list, I can see that, yes, Demo Dave does, and this is going to Demo Dave specifically. It could have gone to a group of people, but Demo Dave specifically has access set up to be eligible to have the web app slot swapper in the context that was provided. Now, what happens there is that Dave receives an email from Microsoft saying, Magnus assigned you this role in this resource group and so forth. And then Dave can now, empowered by this, enabled by this, can go and ask permission to do the slot swapping thing that he wants to do. So Dave goes in and says, hey, if I click on my PIM here, and I see that there's nothing in this list, and I can't tell you how many times I've done this, I have to remember to also click on Azure resources. And when I do, then the Azure PIM stuff shows up, not the AD PIM stuff. So it's different for some reason. And the web app slot swapper, I can click activate on this, Dave says, and I'll type my motivation saying I'm deploying version 2 because 2 is greater than 1. And then I want to ask permission by clicking activate. Emails go out. So Magnus, Dave's manager, me, I receive an email saying, could you approve or reject? And funny enough, this email for some reason was in Swedish. It was localized. So would you like to approve or reject? In this case, I'll go into Azure. I'll look at the pending requests. There's a pending request. If I want to approve it, though, I can't do it from here. I have to click approve requests for some reason. Choose the right request, approve it, and I'll put my version notification saying new version looks cooler. Now all of these things are audited again. Who gave permission? Who asked for permission? Did I approve it? What was the comment? And so forth. Confirm. Emails go out saying the request has been granted to Dave, and it says also this is more of a goes to the admin team. Demo Dave has activated access, and also your role is now active. So Dave gets a message saying your role is active now. Brilliant. Dave tries again. This is a long story, right? But the setup of this only happens once, right? So Dave can ask permission anytime while he has this permission to do so. So Dave goes in to see, do I have an active assignment? I do indeed have the web app slot swapper active. Brilliant. I can deactivate it. If I'm done with my work, I can shut it down again, so I don't have the access. But let's go over to the web application here and see, lo and behold, right? Yay! He has access to do the swap now because he has eligibility to do so. He has been assigned a custom role. He has activated and been approved to activate the custom role. He can now finally click swap. Gives him the opportunity to choose, I want to swap staging with production, click the swap, spin, 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 and success. And now in staging, this is a stage, I'm not going to zoom. This says staging, and this version 1 and version 2 is in production. Okay, now that is hyper detailed. You don't have to go all the way like I did there, but if you go all the way, that's what it looks like. And it's quite powerful because Dave has no access. He has probably read access in production, right? But he does not have access to modify production, save for one action, which is swap. And only if he asks permission. Okay? That's what it looks like. However, managing this is a bit of a chore because you need to specifically say, Dave has this access, Bob has this access, Alice has this access, and Cesar has this. Oh, come on. So there's PIM with groups. How does that work? Well, remember this scenario where we had the people who were in a group of users and Tina was empowered to add more users and so forth? Okay. The scenario is just a little bit different with the PIM groups because they cannot have groups in groups. So you create a group and you can assign it PIM eligibility as, in this case, contributor to these resources. You will then do the thing that you add the members in this group here. Tina is still the owner of that group. She can still add and remove members that have the eligibility to have contributor access in this case. And now, in this case, Bob asks, can I elevate access, please? Tina says, okay, I approve. And now Bob only gets contributor access. The other people do not. So it's still pretty nice. You get out of the chore of doing the one-by-one thing, but it's more direct. It can't be group in group in this context. It doesn't work like that for now. And it's preview. And so, in Azure, there's preview and classic, right? Classic, and you can't just say classic. When you say classic, you have to pop the hip. You go classic, right? So when something is classic, that's an indicator saying that you should be elsewhere. It's another word for deprecated, but Microsoft doesn't use deprecated because it sounds derogatory, so they say classic. I'm also classic, by the way. just want to mention. So classic means you should be elsewhere. We have replaced this functionality with something new. Preview, the opposite, means this is not really in production yet. This is not generally available. You can use the feature. It might change. It may never go into general availability. We are not 100% sure. If you talk to the teams behind the scenes, you can kind of get an indication, yes, this will be in production very soon. We think it's going to be like 6 months or whatever, if you talk to the right person. However, it's not a super guarantee, and preview also means no SLA. So there's a limited thing there, which you need to think about. So PIM automation, automating PIM, not setting this up, not requiring that a muggle, right, that the administrative person who has the responsibility to set up access needs to technically go into the Azure portal and start clicking around, because which muggle would do that? No one. It's not fully baked, so you would like to enable them with automation, but it's not there. So first PIM was created as Azure PIM only, as a feature for Azure. And then somebody took a step back and said, hey, we need the same thing, of course, not only for Azure, but for the other things, like, of M365 and all the other things needs the same stuff. So they moved it, or have been moving it towards, or are moving it towards, it's unclear, towards Microsoft PIM instead. And again, PIM for access groups is currently in preview, and the commandlets for this are kind of in confusion. So I'm going to show you how much they are in confusion. And this is real from the documentation. I'm not sugarcoating or anything. There's a specific PIM API concepts thing you can click on, and then it says PIM API history. Yeah, it says iteration 1 is deprecated. It does say it should say classic, no, but it's actually deprecated, right? It's gone. Iteration 2 supports some Azure AD roles, Azure AD resource roles, blah, 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 something. And then there's the current iteration, what we're working on now. So there's literally like 3 generations of attempts to implement PIM, and we're not done yet. And I don't know when they're going to be done. They've been doing this for a bit. So this is like a pet peeve of mine. I'm like, come on already. This is brilliant functionality. Can you please put it to GA? We'd like to have this with, thank you very much, a functional automation API so I can actually automate this for people who are not technical. Yeah? They can literally just pick a role and a person and say, I want to grant that. And they don't have to do anything. That technical stuff is just happening with an API implementation that technical people know how to set up, right? But we're not exactly there. I'm sorry, we're not. That's the truth. So the REST API for PIM, it's okay to use. I've used it. It actually does the thing. It's a pretty tricky investment. You don't exactly know because they have really changed their mind a couple of times along the road. So if you make a large investment into a version of the API now, who's to say that it's not going to change again? We don't know. Microsoft, come on, man. You'll take the blame on this one. All right. What's the value of PIM? Well, the value is obvious. You get least privilege, better security, just-in-time access with approvals, elevated access control, fewer errors, all brilliant stuff is there. We want this. Okay, yes. That is correct. Yes, PIM requires a P2 license of Active Directory, which is more expensive. So it's expensive to do the right thing, which I disagree with that one, but Microsoft needs to make their money somehow. Managed identities for application access. Let's go with that one instead. I do not want personal access for me. I want the application to have access. And what does that look like? Well, in Azure, let's not exit StreamYard, hopefully. I'm still there. I'm just glancing over to you. Like you're probably going to scream if I do a mistake there. So let's go into the zombies and ghosts context here. And I have an application here, the web application that we have seen. And I also have a storage account. Now, I want to grant my web application to have access to the storage account. Technically, typically what we would do is create a connection string to the storage account and store it in the app config, either in the web.config file and deploy that, or in the app config section of app service, right? But you probably all know that instead what you need to do is not application insights, authentication. I clicked the wrong thing. No, identity. Third time's a charm. This thing here, which I have actually already turned on, is a flip of a switch. It's a true or a false in a bicep deployment or ARM template deployment. To say, yes, I would like this instance of a resource, which is a compute resource, could be a logic app, a VM, anything that is a compute resource can have this ability to have a manifestation, an identity in the Active Directory. So it's an object in the Active Directory. Wonderful thing about that is that the key, the secret, the certificate behind the scenes is managed by the system. No one can access it. We can't get it from the system. It is a system managed identity. So it's brilliant. You don't have to refresh that identity access, the certificate. If it runs out, the system will replace it. It's actually does exactly what it needs to do. So I can allow my application instance, which I can never impersonate. I can't steal the secret of the application. I can't impersonate it, but I can allow that to get access into my storage account. And lo and behold, right, here is my web application. It has storage blob data contributor access. So my application that runs in this instance is able to interact with the blob content of the blob storage account, a separate resource. Means that there is no connection string here. There's no certificate to renew. There's no management. There's no governance involved, but there is a system managed identity which can have the access and no one can steal or impersonate this. So we have removed a connection string from the world, which has made the world slightly better. Yep. So, and I think you basically all know that, but honestly, I've met a lot of companies where, a team that is new to Azure that have deployed off cloud before and been using connection strings, and that's what they know, that's what they're used to. And now they're deploying the same application to Azure, they're migrating to Azure, and they don't know about managed identities. so they are not using it. Yeah. And how does this work with local development? Brilliant, thank you very much. Because local development, you can use a connection string anyway, or you could choose to use a certificate with a service principal, if that's your poison, works as well. So you can create a service principal in the Active Directory, you can grant it access to the storage account, and then you can use the certificate of that service principal and install that on the machine where you're running the application. That works as well. So there are options here, but there are good options, good ways to remove connection strings is, I guess, the message. The value of managed identities, no more connection string management. Connection strings are brittle, mistakes can happen. Connection strings are a security risk, and connection strings can expire. Yeah? Yes, sir. Does it work if the firewall is on the account? You're talking about if your application is running locally? Yeah. So if it does work, but it's a separate question. It works if your web application and your storage account are on the same network and they can see each other on the network. Then it works. So it's unrelated to the security as such. It's network security, and this is more like a connection or access security, right? So they are related, but they're not the exact same thing. So the answer is yes, and the requirement is that they're on the same network. Brilliant. Different layers of security, but still the same context. Yes. All right. We were a couple of minutes before I started my session, so I'm gonna go hopefully until I'm done here. So automated deployment. I'm just gonna note the obvious. This is a whole other session, or like a workshop day or two. This is DevOps, GitHub. Use whatever you want to do, or any other service. There are plenty others. TeamCity is brilliant to do automated deployments. Now, automated deployments is in fact an access control concern. Right? So instead of humans having access to deploy to a location, only the automation has access to deploy there, right? So you can direct the deployment to production, but the people who launched that deployment themselves do not have access to production. Of course, you can couple that with giving them contributor access to production with a PIM activation required or something like that, so they are able to go into production when they need to, but they shouldn't automatically always have that access. Technically, you want to ensure that only computers deploy to production, obviously, right? Which makes it an access control concern and makes it a really useful, concern of access control in this scenario. Humans can touch development and test areas. They can fiddle with all the things. They can develop and they can test things, but in production they cannot. So automated deployments remove the error-prone humans from the context, and they try to make their own kind of smart decisions, right? So let's remove them, right? And then and make sure that only computers. You don't send a human to do a computer's job, right? Brilliant. Humans have no access to production. Only automation touches production. PIM setup, again, what I just said not 2 minutes ago. You can give the humans access to potentially go into production when they might need to, but not as per normal, not permanent access. So the automated deployments are secure and they're always accurate, right? I just wanted to mention that it leads to, the power of automation and infrastructure as code, which is not native to everyone, right? Let's be real. I'm sure many of you do it brilliantly. Yes, yes, yes. It's also equally the case that in many companies around the world, people are not doing this. And I go in to help them do it and set it up. But the empowerment of automation and infrastructure as code, it is awesome, right? It leads to enablement, accountability, and it's easy to govern. So all the things that we want. That was just a note, right? I think we all know it very well. And again, that's a whole other talk of DevOps, right? So I'm not covering that today. But I will give you a little tip, a little trick up the sleeves. So unfortunately, we have spent probably way too much time implementing this, but it is a cool trick, it's a neat trick, and I want to share it. How to enable your service principals to rotate their own secrets. What does that mean? Well, a service principal is the Active Directory object that you can grant access to do things in Azure, for example, right? And it's a machine identity. It's not a managed identity, because if you are deploying an application, let's put it this way. If you're deploying your application to Azure using a build and deployment agent that runs on a virtual machine in Azure that you control with your own special implementation, your own special installation and special sauce, then that VM can use a managed identity to have access to deploy to various places in Azure. Brilliant. Use managed identity for that. However, if you can get away with using the Microsoft provided automated build agents that are included in the service, you cannot make your own special installations on those. But if you don't need to, then don't use a VM because you're paying for that VM. Use the built-in service. And the built-in service, to grant it access to deploy to Azure, you need to give it a connection, and the connection is based on a service principal. Service principals are configured inside of your connections with service principals are configured inside of DevOps. You can do it with automation, click next, or you can do it manually. Effectively, this service principal has a secret, and that secret needs to be installed in DevOps. A service principal can have an owner. I think I'm talking ahead on my slides now. I do not want to manage secrets. I want self-managed secrets. Okay, so let's see if I have this in slides. A service principal can have owners. So as an object in the Active Directory, the service principal itself can have an owner. The cool thing is that I can make the service principal an owner of itself, effectively granting the service principal the ability to reset its own secret. Why is that good? Well, because I can take that service principal and have it be an owner of itself and manage its own secret, and it can, actually I'm not going to demo it, but I'm going to show you a couple of screenshots. Again, also because of time, right? Here I have a trigger that runs daily. Daily this thing executes, and what it does is that it checks in DevOps and says, okay, which connections do you have? Oh, these. Okay, which service principals do they have? Oh, these. Okay, now I have a service principal in hand. I run for each service principal another, did it not? Yeah. I run another instance of another action thing. I run a pipeline, thank you, for each service principal. And the service principal itself is executing as this pipeline. And it can then say, okay, I would like a new secret for this principal, me. I now have that secret in my hand. I'm not going to show it to anyone. It's a secret. And I'm going to give it to DevOps. And DevOps says, thank you for the secret. I will associate this secret with the connection, and I will not share it with anyone. What that means is that on a daily basis in this scenario, all the secrets for the deployments are reset, and the only single one that holds that secret is Azure DevOps. And the only way that you could get to that secret is if you hack the Microsoft Azure DevOps system. So good luck with that. That means that you can ensure that no person needs to govern, maintain, reset, recycle, and also cannot lose the secret because they never have it. And it took a while to figure that out, but it's kind of funny that it works. It's a really, really cool trick. So the benefit is that DevOps only knows the secret and they can use it. Nobody else can access the secret. It's impossible. And a secret that you don't have cannot be taken from you. You're very secure and your secret will never expire. So long as you remember to monitor that trigger that runs daily and ensure that there's no problem with the resetting of the secret. That's going to work forever. Good. I think I'm on time, which is useful. You guys have been really, really attentive, and I've had a couple of questions. This is the time for additional questions to round off. Any more thoughts, questions here? You're in shock? You're just Swedish and you don't ask questions? Yes. Oh, microphone. You have a super specific question.
Super specific question. Would you add your managed identities also to groups
Yes.
to resources? Yes.
That's a brilliant question, and it was kind of half asked here before. Would I add the managed identities to the same kind of security groups that I already have? Probably, most likely in most scenarios, because that access is set, the appropriate access is set up.
Right.
I don't have to. I can go into Azure and add access to a service principal specifically in Azure if I know it's like a long-lived thing that is associated specifically with these resources and yada yada. I could do that. Like if the time comes when I'm going to delete that resource now, right? The web app is going away. If I have granted specific access to a service principal with the sole purpose of deploying to that specific instance, you know what? It's okay to give it access in Azure. But I could also do the more right thing, if you will, which is to add the service principal or the managed identity to the same security groups, effectively giving them the same access as the humans have.
Right. Yeah. So,
but not with PIM though.
No. But because I was Googling a bit because now currently we use. I found a way to add with Bicep. You can add the role assignment.
Yeah.
So I want to add for instance, my Azure function wants access to a service bus.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I use a Bicep role assignment.
Yep.
But then it would be added directly.
Yeah, it is added directly.
So how would you automate the assignment of the managed identity to the Azure AD user group?
I'm looking at the Microsoft person in the room because
all right,
Active Directory provider for Bicep.
No, so you would probably use script that.
Right. Yeah, I mean I don't know the status of the conversation there. Because Bicep, of course, is ARM. ARM is Bicep, Bicep is ARM. And so you can use it with deploying resources in Azure, and then you have the context that you're referring to that, yes, I can take the identity of a service principal or a managed identity object, and I can grant it access to my web application or whatnot, which means it has the direct access in Azure that we talked about that we kind of didn't want to have. But can I do the same with automation and ensure that the identities are giving access through groups in Active Directory? It's a kind of a convoluted question, but I hope you follow along, right? Answer is yes, it can be done in various ways. And the conversation is ongoing about ensuring that there are additional providers to the Bicep concept, not only a provider for Azure resources, but maybe a provider for Active Directory, so that you could be controlling the same things from your Bicep, talking both to Azure management endpoint and to the AD management endpoint, right? It's definitely something that people are asking for, because that would solve exactly this scenario.
So I mean, you could ask for everything you can do it, but I mean, can you do it in a pretty way?
If we're gonna make snide comments about Terraform here, Terraform has that notion, right, that there's a provider for like everything, right? You can deploy with Terraform to anything at all, right? And every one of those implementations in their providers gives you access to a different service, right? You can deploy to AWS, you can make changes in Azure Active Directory, you can make changes just about anywhere if there is a provider for it, right? Bicep was originally envisioned to be the high-level language DSL for making sure that the detail heavy ARM templates kind of recede into the background, right? But yes, you want additional providers for the same, so you can control more things than just Azure with Bicep. Yeah, exactly. Yes. Whew. But that is complicated and a wonderful, wonderful question. And it's spot on the money. Okay. More questions? We can also talk during the day and during the day tomorrow, anytime you like. And same goes for all of these speakers. They are wonderful people. They don't bite very hard. So they like to talk, and then just bring them coffee and they'll probably be nice. So 5 best Azure Access Control practices are: grant Azure RBAC to Azure Active Directory with security groups, use just-in-time access with PIM, kill connection strings with managed identities, remove human access with automated deployments, and let your principals manage their own secrets. Those were my 5 best Azure Access Control tips, and I'm sure many of these you knew, and I'm also sure that you know that not everyone always uses these things. All right. So enablement, accountability, and governance, that's what we want. We want to make it easy to do the right thing. We don't want to burden people with the chore of being able to make mistakes. They don't want to be able to make mistakes. They want to do their job with excellence and not accidentally mess up production or something like that. That's it. Thank you very much. And so in between all of these sessions,